I don't think it's very productive to make hyperbolic and overly dramatic statements. That being said, the Blue Jays have to fire their manager right now.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Baseball fans, welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If you don't believe me, then why would I have a lower third where you can call me Sully? I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been a baseball podcaster for the last decade or so, and I've been a member here of the Locked On Podcast Network for the last 5 seasons. So you can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On MLB Pods. Is that what it is? Yes, it took me a second to remember. Good Lord, I really just lost it for 1 second. Locked On MLB Pods. You can follow me. I am your pal Sully. I think I am at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Man, I just really locked up there for a second. Holy cow. Well, there you go. There you go. Hey, look it. I'm just coming off of watching the end of the Orioles and Blue Jays game. And by the way, if you want to just follow a really great Blue Jays podcast, go check out Locked On Blue Jays. They've Craig and everyone there does a great job on that show. And he's forgotten more about the Blue Jays than I'll ever know, even though I do go back to the days of Dave Stieb and Jim Clancy. Look at it's not yet Memorial Day, but Memorial Day is going to be in about a week from tomorrow. It's late May. We're approaching the 1/3 mark of the season. And with that in mind, that's where I think is the realistic first checkpoint of the season. The real first point that you could say, hey, how are we doing? It's the first time you can realistically look at the standings and have any real, opinion of the matter. A third of the season will be over, and you'll say, okay, are we contenders or are we not? What are we doing here? Now, the Blue Jays have been cursed with a little bit of I don't know, they were screwed at one point. And that is when they aligned the divisions, they did not put the Blue Jays in the Central Division, where they have a natural rival with the Detroit Tigers. Now, you could have put the Cleveland Indians as they were, or the Guardians now. You could have put them in the American League East. And have the Blue Jays in the Central. Instead, the Blue Jays are in the East. That's one of those borderline teams. And this is where geography has them hosed. If, when they were aligning the divisions, they decided to put Cleveland in the East and the Toronto Blue Jays in the Central, right now, the Blue Jays would be a half game out of first place, battling it out with the Minnesota Twins. As I'm recording this, I'm recording this on Sunday the 21st. I'm going to drop it on Sunday the 21st. The Blue Jays are currently tied with the Angels 1-1 in what has been an interesting series. Instead, the Blue Jays are in last place in the American League East. And again, last place doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad team. Right now, the Blue Jays, even with the loss they had today to the Baltimore Orioles, are 3 games above 500. They have a winning record. And even with the slump that they've had recently, they're still a team that has more than a realistic shot of being a playoff team. I picked them to win the division because I didn't really have faith in the Yankees to repeat their wonderful season that they had last year. And it doesn't look like they're going to. I think the Yankees are a good team. I think the Yankees are going to be a playoff team. I thought the Rays were going to be a playoff team because they were a playoff team last year despite all their injuries. Nobody expected them to have right now they're 20 games above 500. That's a lot of positive capital to play with. Right now the Blue Jays are not a playoff. Again, can't check the standings in earnest, but right now they're 2.5 games out with 2/3 of the season to play. So yeah, the season isn't. There's not a moment where you should have abject panic in Toronto. I'm starting the show off like this. I actually didn't prepare much. I wanted to get my visceral thoughts, and I want to sort of get this out of the way up front to say I acknowledge it's early. I acknowledge the Blue Jays are above 500, so therefore they're not by any merit a bad team. And I acknowledge the fact that if they were not playing in the American League East, the optics of this team would be much different. But there's the rub. They do. And here's another rub. If you play in this division with a runaway train like the Tampa Bay Rays, who took two from a good team, the Milwaukee Brewers, and wound up playing them very well at the Trop this weekend, you can't afford to fall back. And when you have head-to-head games within your division, because you don't have 19 of them like you've had in the past, you can't afford to get swept at home by a team you're chasing. Right now, the Orioles of all team, are the one that are, they're for the historically positive start that the Tampa Bay Rays have had this year. The Orioles are only 2 games back in the loss column. So the Blue Jays had to show up. And look, the games were close. I mean, don't be fooled by the final score on the Sunday game was 8-3. Don't be fooled by that. And don't be fooled by any rocks that I've got, because it was an extra inning game. And both teams scored. The BS extra runner scored in the 10th for both teams. But Baltimore put up a 5 spot, including 4 that were not the extra runner. And so it was 8-3 was the final in extra innings. Yesterday it was 6-5 in extra innings, of which a 3-run rally by Baltimore in the 8th tied it up. And then, of course, on Friday, which one was the game on Friday? Friday game, which was it was 6-2. It was actually a lot closer than that. The Orioles poured it on a little bit, and that's the one where Gibson got the victory. And it was Mountcastle got the big 3-run homer. Okay, Orioles are a good team. We all know that. It's a tough division. We all know that. I still think the Blue Jays need to fire their manager right now. Why do I think that? Why do I think that based upon this sweep, just because these 3 bad games? No. Because, well, I have reasons for saying that. And there's nothing against John Schneider. He never keyed my car. That's not what's going on here. So why am I so adamant that they should fire him? Well, maybe you should hang on for the next segment. But for right now, it's time for us to talk about, drumroll, Sorare. Sorare is our brand new sponsor. It is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace, transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from all 30 major league teams. Unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, Sorare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, competing player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards. It's no cost to play. Plus, the more you win, the more you advance, collecting increasingly powerful cards and accessing next-level competitions and rewards. And they've partnered with Major League Baseball All-Stars Juan Soto and Julio Rodriguez to serve as Sorare brand ambassadors. Both are featured in Sorare's current brand campaign, will engage with Sorare community throughout the season at Major League Baseball events. Sorare game weeks happen twice weekly and span a 3 or 4 day cycle. At the end of game weeks, Sorare managers who rank near at the top of the MLB leaderboards will win a variety of rewards, which include Sorare scarcity cards, game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, and VIP experiences like meeting MLB stars. Prizes may vary depending on the competition. So head to Sorare.com/lockedon. That's spelled Sorare, SORARE.com, to draft your team of free player cards. Set your lineup and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's Sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today. By the way, the copy doesn't say to say epic rewards like that. I don't know, it makes me chuckle. John Schneider. John Schneider is the manager of the Toronto Blue Jays. He is the person in my firing range right now. And I will be the first to say that if the Blue Jays turn it around, and they're capable of doing that, and they go on have a great year, and they're capable of doing that, I will be the first to eat crow. I will get a bowl, it'll say crow on it, and I will eat from it. Because there have been times I've called for the heads of managers, and those managers have come through. The most glaring example I can think of that made me look bad when I called for their head was Dave Martinez in 2019, when the Washington Nationals clearly had only one real shot left to win a pennant, and they stumbled and bumbled and grumbled out of the gate and were in dead last place right around this time. And I said, you know what? It's not working with Dave Martinez. He's had enough time to do it. Well, guess what? The Nats turned it around. They wound up winning the World Series. And I said I was wrong. He proved me wrong. And John Schneider could prove me wrong as well. And John Schneider, I have nothing against the guy. He's the kind of manager that I think more baseball teams should be trying to hire, which are players who have worked their way up through the minor league system as a manager, as a coach. He was a 30-year-old manager when he was in the Blue Jays system managing their minor league team in Vancouver. He was the manager of teams, the Lansing Lugnuts. He was manager of the Blue Jays team in Dunedin. He was manager of the Fisher Cats in New Hampshire. And he had, sorry, as I scratch my nose, he had experience managing some of the young players who were coming up through the farm system. So I like it when teams hire players or hire managers with managerial experience. I think it's ridiculous when managers bring someone in, people who were former players, but like Walt Weiss went from being a high school coach. Granted, Walt Weiss was an all-star player and everything, but he was a high school coach and suddenly was the manager of the Rockies with no managerial experience building up to it. Same thing with Aaron Boone. Again, baseball family. He was a former all-star, hit the home run off of Tim Wakefield, blah, blah, blah. But managing and being part of a coaching staff is a skill that I would think takes a few years to develop. And they gave the car keys to Major League Baseball teams to people with no managerial experience. So I like when they have a hire like this, okay? This is nothing against the guy. And he worked his way up and he earned a spot on the Major League staff. But last year, and see if you can, where I'm trying to make a parallel here, Charlie Montoyo was the manager of the Toronto Blue Jays. There was a lot of expectations for Charlie Montoyo. And when Charlie Montoyo was fired from the job, I don't remember the exact, what day was it? It was on July 13th, okay? Right around the All-Star break. The Blue Jays at that time were a playoff team. They were one of the wild card teams. So by definition, and also remember, the Yankees got off to that unbelievable start where it looked like they were going to win 110 games or something like that. And in the end, they didn't win 100 games, but they wound up winning the division by 7 games, and it was a comfortable lead. So the Blue Jays were in a division with a runaway train like the Yankees, and they were still a playoff team. And came the guillotine. Off came Charlie Montoyo's head. So there's a precedent for this. And Schneider was not brought in as a great fit, as this amazing managerial candidate who happened to be out there. It was the guy on the staff, brought in as an interim manager. So, as it turned out, the Blue Jays did play well under Schneider, and they wound up they wound up going 46-28. Their team was above 500 over under Montoyo, but only 4 games. Both Montoyo and Schneider won 46 games as a manager. Montoyo also lost 42, while Schneider only lost 28. They finished strongly. And then they went to the playoffs. Mariners won the first game, and then the Blue Jays had a huge lead in game 2, and the Mariners came storming back and wound up winning that game and eliminating the Blue Jays at home. And I remember I listened to that game on the radio with and I was at my high school reunion listening to that game. Just goes to show you how close I kept things with the people there. And the minute that game was over, I turned to my friend Greg, who I was listening to the game with, and I said, like, well, it looks like the Blue Jays are getting a new manager. Because that was the kind of postseason collapse that usually ends a managerial career. But they brought him back. I said, okay, all right, fine. Now, here we are. Once again, you're in a division with a runaway train. Once again, the Blue Jays have their noses above 500. 3 games above 500, similar to Montoyo's 4 games above 500. But it's also clear something's not clicking with this team. There's something in the Rubik's Cube that is not working with this Toronto team. And this Toronto team was built to win now. This is not a rebuilding project, and this is not a situation where they're like, oh, I hope we get to be one of the wild card teams. This is the team that is designed to win the freaking pennant. This is the team whose purpose it is when they bring in Chapman, when they made the trade when they traded away Teoscar Hernandez, when they bring in huge talent and they develop the talents like Vladdy Guerrero and Dante Bichette's kid, Bo. I almost call him Dante Bichette. I try to cover myself there. Bassett comes in. The big free agent moves comes in for the purpose of making the Blue Jays the pennant winner. This doesn't look like a pennant winner. And there are little things that stick my antenna up. Some of the botched moves in the bullpen and Schneider doing the boneheaded move where this pitching coach came out to talk to Alek Manoah. Alek Manoah, a Cy Young candidate from last year. His ace was on the freaking mound. The pitching coach had already come out to talk to them. All right, there we go. Let's go in and play. And then at one point, Schneider says, oh, I want to go out and talk more strategy. And he went. And the umpire said, what are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, I'm going to talk some strategy. You can't come out twice in the same inning. You have to be lifted. And that's what they did. Now, Manoah's not off to a great start. He's actually off to kind of a lousy start. And you can point to some of the disappointment of Toronto more on some of the players underperforming. But he had to take Manoah out of the game. And it reminded me of a moment that Don Mattingly did a similar thing when he was the manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers. My father, who's a rabid, may he rest in peace, was a rabid Giants fan, and he took glee of Don Mattingly being the manager of the Dodgers. And he said to me every time I tried to say, well, the Dodgers are good, my father would always say, remember, they're managed by an idiot. And you have a manager in a tight series with tight games making blunders like that. It's not a good look. It's also not a good look that this team just can't seem to catch fire. Are they going to catch the Rays? I don't know. The Orioles might. And the Orioles were not the star-studded team that the Toronto Blue Jays are. And it's not like we're talking about, like the Guardians have been struggling this year. They're sub 500. They lost a couple of heartbreaking games to the Mets over this weekend. But the man in charge there is Terry Francona. He's been there, and he's also done that. When you see someone with an experienced manager who's going up and down and up and down, you can say, okay, look, they'll ride through this. They will ride through this. The Mets have had some ups, some downs, but you look over and you see it's Buck Showalter at the helm. He at least knows what he's doing, and they've gone on a winning streak. San Diego is the same thing. San Diego has got off to one of the most disappointing starts I can possibly imagine. Only the pure ineptitude of the Rockies have kept them out of the cellar. But you look over and there's multiple Manager of the Year winner, Bob Melvin. So you get the sense that, okay, they'll right that ship. At least you trust the captain. John Schneider may turn out to be a great manager. John Schneider may turn out to be a great baseball mind. I was skeptical of Brian Snitker when he was brought up to become the manager of the Atlanta Braves, and he's turned out to be one of the best managers in baseball. But right now, I'm not feeling it with John Schneider. I'm not. And in a year where you still have about 2/3 of the season left to go, why have someone driving the bus that you don't think is going to get you to the destination? Especially when there are people available who might be able to do the job. Look at, sometimes it's the driver and sometimes it's the parts. Sometimes it's how it's constructed. And sometimes you need to have people who can look at what you put together and fix it just the right way, which of course brings us to eBay Motors. Now, eBay Motors knows that for a championship team, it's about making sure that every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts, accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can make sure that every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride! eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit is only available for U.S. customers. Sorry, Blue Jays fans. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Now, to the amazement of my many listeners here, I am not going to bring up Bruce Bochy's lieutenants. Ooh. I've been singing the praises of Roberto Kelly and Hensley Mullins as two of the trusted lieutenants of Bruce Bochy during his 3 World Series titles as manager of the San Francisco Giants. And I've been screaming and screaming and screaming that they should be major league managers. I stand by that. But I don't think they're the right managers for the Blue Jays. I'll tell you why. Those are two people who I think should be given the car keys and be asked to help put together a team. Given the car keys of a team and say, okay, we're going to build this team together, have an off season with them, figure out the plan, figure out the strategy. Because they'll both be first-time major league managers. Both have managed international competition and everything like that. But to be able to say you're a major league manager, for one of them, I think it's best to start saying, okay, you're going to start from the beginning of the year. There are some teams that I look at and go like, I won't mention them right now. Maybe Bud Black will step down from the Rockies. Maybe Phil Nevin will be let go from the Angels. Have someone just start from the beginning. But there are 2 candidates out there who are the type of candidates when you look at it, go like, could walk into a major league clubhouse right now with recent playoff managerial experience and have the players say, oh, okay, things are different now. And maybe give that message to the team like, hey, we're designed to build right now to win right now. And I'll tell you who the first one is because he is on Bob Melvin's staff. And to me, it's a little bit weird that he is still looking for a job as a manager. It's Mike Schildt. Now, Mike Schildt won the Manager of the Year a few years ago with the St. Louis Cardinals. and he took over, the fate of the Cardinals turned. Got him to the postseason, and also, uh, was a NL Manager of the Year in 2019 when they got to the National League Championship Series. They played in the playoffs in the truncated season of the COVID, of course. They got to the wild card game in 2021 where they lost a walk-off game to Los Angeles, but they went on a wild winning streak down the stretch. Remember, it was super clumped, and you got teams like the Padres, the Mets, and believe it or not, the Cincinnati Reds were all battling for that second wild card spot in 2021. And then a spectacular September just made the Cardinals shoot past all of them, and they got to the playoffs. And the Cardinals rewarded him by firing him. Yeah, he didn't agree with the front office of this, that, or the other thing, but I never quite understood it. Didn't quite make sense to me. Oliver Marmol came in. I mean, got him to the playoffs last year. They've had obviously an up and down season this year. And Schildt is now a member of the San Diego Padres coaching staff. It's interesting. You have a manager in Bob Melvin in San Diego who has won multiple managers of the year. Mike Schildt won a manager of the year, and he's on the coaching staff. And Matt Williams won a manager of the year when he was a manager of the Washington Nationals in 2014, I think it was. So you have multiple managers of the year on that staff. About Matt Williams, I didn't see. Okay, he's okay, but Schildt, it's just you have to go all the way back to 2021 to see him lead a team down the stretch in an exceptional way. You have to go all the way back to 2019 to see one of his teams get to the league championship series, something the Blue Jays haven't done since 2016. Something they've only done twice since the era of the wild card. And he is available. Yes, he's on the coaching staff for San Diego, but I'm sure that if something was worked out or he'd be able to negotiate. The Padres wouldn't stand in the way of him becoming a major league manager. And according to an article in the San Diego Union Tribune, he's looking to become a manager again. He was really hurt by what happened in St. Louis. And sometimes it's good to get a manager in their second job. Sometimes you get someone who's had the bumps and bruises somewhere, and his bumps and bruises include trips to the league championship series, or at least one trip to the league championship series. Those are nice bumps and bruises to have. And to sit and say he's available to take the car keys for this team, a team that already has stars along their lineup, already has quality pitchers in their staff. Say, here's what you've got. And now we have an experienced manager in there. Sending a message to the team. You don't want to humiliate John Schneider? Give him a phony job. Promote him to vice president of Franks and Beans or Beans and Franks. Promote him to the front office. Or allow him to take a managerial job or take over one of your farm teams. Or give him a chance to go to another organization. I don't know, but this is a team that's designed to win now, and I don't and you don't think they're going to do it, at least on the path they're on right now. But then there's another name. And I'll say it. A future Hall of Fame manager who was managing, the last time he managed, you have to go all the way back to 2022. Did Joe Maddon really go from a highly coveted future Hall of Fame manager genius to an unemployable dolt in 2 years? The guy took the Rays to the World Series when they had a payroll lower than the Locked On Podcast Network, in a division with the A-Rod Jeter Yankees and the Ortiz Red Sox. They won the pennant. They won the division again. They went to the playoffs a bunch of times. And then he goes to Chicago and does something that Leo DeRocher couldn't do, did something that Dusty Baker couldn't do, did something that Lou Piniella couldn't do, did something Dallas Green couldn't do, that nobody could do since the Teddy Roosevelt administration. and that was win a World Series title for the Cubs. Took them to the playoffs multiple times. Then he comes to the Angels, arguably the most dysfunctional organization in baseball. He couldn't win there. Guess what? Nobody can. Not the way that they're set up. They've been given two players, superstars from the heavens, placed upon the lap in Anaheim. Was that Joe Maddon's fault? It's a tough argument to say that it was. But he gets fired because the team is spiraling. All right, fine. Sometimes a manager stubs their toe in a situation. Dick Williams is in the Hall of Fame. He took the Red Sox to the World Series, won back-to-back World Series with the A's, went over to the Angels. Didn't work out with the Angels, but then put together a winner in Montreal, then took the San Diego Padres to the World Series. Sometimes there could be a burp in the middle of it. Jim Leland took the Pirates to one Francisco Cabrera swing away from the World Series, won a World Series title with the Florida Marlins, goes to Colorado. Didn't work out in Colorado. Comes back, manages the Tigers to 2 pennants. And if I can't remember if he's in the Hall of Fame or not. He obviously will be once it happens. All right. So you look at Maddon's resume. Great career with the Rays, great career with the Cubs, stubbed his toe with the Angels, pulled a Dick Williams, comes over to Toronto. Handed him a team with stars. Vladdy Jr., you know, the Chapmans, the Springers of the world. All right? Give him that team. So you have those two right there. You know, a lot of times when you say replace a manager, sometimes you need to replace a manager. And a lot of times a response you get from people is, well, you have to have a replacement. Sometimes you don't. If the manager is being a disaster, sometimes a living human being, maybe, just sort of like put out an ad in Craigslist. Sometimes that's what you got to do. When the Red Sox were folding and lit on fire under Bobby Valentine, they should have fired him in mid-season. But the refrain, well, who are they going to replace him with? I don't know. The 15th caller on WEEI, somebody. It's not working with Schneider. I don't trust him. If you're a Blue Jays fan, send me a tweet. Where's my lower third? Send me a tweet at Sully Baseball on Twitter. Do you trust John Schneider to manage this team to the pennant? Because that's what this team is designed for. This is not designed to be, we made the wild card series again. We didn't go far. You don't make these deals for the, it's a bad Jay Leno impersonation. So here we go. Make that move now. You have a reason to let him go because it doesn't feel right. And I don't trust him with the car keys. And there are two people who, if you hand them the car keys, no one will be able to say, well, what have they done? Well, they have, one has multiple manager of the years and the other has a manager of the year. And they both have something to prove. Sometimes getting that manager who has something to prove has a little bit of chip on their shoulder. That could be a good thing too. So, go to, by the way, thanks so much for making it your first listen. If you are someone who is listening every day, send us a text on Twitter at Everyday Sully. I want to know who's listening every single day. So, go to Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and on Instagram. You can follow me. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Later today, I'm going to be recording with Miller Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks. We're covering the big stories of the day, but I felt compelled to drop this episode on Sunday to just mark the date, 21st day of May, 2023. The Blue Jays need to make a managerial change now, before I do the next eBay Motors read. So, saying no offense, John Schneider, you're not the right guy. And you might as well make that change with 2/3 of the season to go instead of only half. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.